Hello, and welcome to Cooking Time. I'm David Martone, Executive Chef at Classic Time Cooking School. This show is going to be dedicated to a couple days I spent in Maine, Lobster City. Great lobsters, great other food. We're going to do a little dessert, which I don't usually do dessert, if you know, because I don't really eat dessert, so I don't really cook dessert a whole lot. Not that I'm not trained to do it, so tonight I'm going to give you a little dessert, kind of a little Maine treat. Everything is blueberries up there. So we'll come right back and get started. I've got 3 great dishes, 2 with lobster and 1 little dessert. Welcome back, and our show is dedicated to Maine. Spent a couple days up there, my first time in Maine, so we'll have a great show for you. I'm David Martone, Executive Chef at Classic Time Cooking School. I'm going to start off actually with making a lobster pot pie. If there's any dish you can think of, you go to Maine, they put lobster in it. I had lobster carbonara. I had lobster mac and cheese. I had plain steamed lobster. I had lobster roll. I had lobster every way you can think of it. So we're going to get going with a lobster pot pie. So as with any pot pie, we need to make the basic sauce for it. So I'm going to put some butter in my pan here, melt that down with a little bit of olive oil. We sometimes add olive oil to keep the butter from burning. In this case, I'm adding the olive oil just to lighten it up as far as the saturated fats, because there's heavy cream and lots of other stuff. A common misnomer, people think that lobster and shrimp are high in fat and high in cholesterol, and it's quite the opposite. Very high in protein, very nutritious, and not high in saturated fat. So lobster is actually a great dish to eat. So I'm going to add some chopped up shallots and scallion. You can use scallion, you can use leek. Scallions look nice today, the leeks look so-so, so I got the scallions. A couple of wooden spoons. What we're going to do as we get this cooking, I'm adding some carrot. We want to get this a little bit tender. Then I'm going to add some liquids to it, but before I add the liquids, I want to make sure that those liquids will thicken up nicely. So I'm going to create really a roux in this pan. So while this starts tenderizing our ingredients here, I'll start on our dessert. Shifting everything else around so we don't start putting vinegar and mayonnaise in our dessert when we don't want to. Blueberries in Maine are very different than the blueberries here, and unfortunately I couldn't bring any fresh blueberries home because I made a side trip to visit my brother who lives in Vermont, and the blueberries just wouldn't have held up. So got our Jersey blueberries in my bowl here. Going to add a little bit of cornstarch to that, little bit of sugar, a little bit of cinnamon, and some peaches. Now hopefully this will work for me. Little trick with cutting peaches, and sometimes it's impossible to get them apart, especially when they're super soft, but when you look at a peach, there's always a line on that peach. Maybe we can get a close-up on that. I'll hold up 2 just to see. There's a line, and it's almost a seam that you can feel it. So what I do is I take my knife and I put it right on that seam, and that's where I want to cut all the way around. Oh, look, we even have a tag on this one. Let's get that right off. So I put my knife down and cut and follow it just 360 degrees, and then give it a twist. Providing you cut on that seam, you should be able to split your peach like this. I'll cut another one just to see if we are on a roll here. Give it a twist, and it comes out. The other side, you need to just gently take the pit out. Never do that this way, because you're too inclined to press through the soft peach and to cause a problem with your hand. So I'm just slicing these peaches up. We'll see how much we need and how much I'll have left for my cereal tomorrow. Love peaches. These are a little underripe, which is not a problem because we're going to be baking these. I think that might be just about all I need. A few more little slices. Perfect. So it looks like I've got a lot of peach left for my cereal. Okay. Now, remember I talked about the roux. This is a French technique actually called sanger. When you sanger, and I know I'm probably mispronouncing it, I mispronounced half of the English language, you are actually making a roux. You're adding some flour, and then you're going to stir that around, lower my heat a bit, and then I can add liquid, and that liquid will thicken up nicely. You want to cook it down a little bit just to get that starchiness out. Going to add some heavy cream, which I'll put in second after my either fish stock or clam broth. I'm using clam broth. You add cold liquid to a roux. You can't add liquid. You can't add a roux to liquid. The roux will just harden up into a ball. But this will kind of smooth out. Here's our heavy cream. And a little bit of sherry. A little bit more liquid here. And then we'll let this cook a little bit. It'll thicken up nicely, and then I'll add my other ingredients, which will be some tarragon and some peas and a little bit of lemon zest. Okay, I'm going to let that cook. Back to my dessert with the blueberries. I'm going to add a little bit of lemon. Justin was kind enough to pull out the pits for me. Got one stray. This is going to be a wonderful rustic type of tart. Oop, lost a peach. You can do this with puff pastry. You can do this with a pie crust. So I've got my piece of puff pastry on a parchment-lined sheet. You can see now how this is really getting moist and all of my ingredients are coming together. It's almost like they've been sitting in this, that the sugar has melted, but we just put it in a couple of minutes ago. So now I'm simply going to dump all of this out onto my pastry dough. Get all that wonderful liquid from the sugar. And kind of arrange my peaches a little bit to make sure that we've got nice even distribution with the peaches and the blueberries. And then we're going to just pull these ends in and kind of fold it all around. And then fold these back a little bit. You're just kind of making a hand-formed little rustic tart, and then opening it back up a little bit, and some juice may ooze out. That's fine. And then I'm going to scatter a little bit of some almonds on this. I think that's about enough. Put this over here. And for our finish, I have a little egg wash. Just one egg. I'm going to put a tiny bit of water. Rule of thumb is one egg, about a tablespoon of water. And I want to brush all around the edge of my tart and get that right into the oven. Some people put a little bit of sugar on this also around the edge, but I think we had quite enough sugar with putting it just on the berries. Okay, we'll need that for our next dish. Let's get that right into the oven. I'll lower this down a little bit, rinse my hands, and come back to my lobster pot pie. I have some fresh tarragon here. Just want to chop this up. If you don't have fresh tarragon, use some dry, but use it sparingly, because the dry herbs will be much more powerful, and they take a little time to open up. People always make the mistake of putting dry herbs in, tasting it, not being able to taste their pronounced flavor, and then simply over-seasoning it. Now we have some peas to add. So remember, we have peas and carrots, and now some lemon zest. Whenever you're zesting a lemon, make sure you don't go down too far, just the outer coloring. This lemon will actually wake up the flavor of this cream sauce. Now, before I salt and pepper it, I always want to taste a little bit. You get a small spoon. And when you're doing this, you use one spoon, you never dip it. You use your mixing spoon to put a drop on it, and then you can taste from this spoon 100 times. Tiny bit more sherry. And a tiny bit more cream. I know it's a heavy dish, but you're not going to eat lobster every day. Unless, of course, you're in Maine for a week. Then you can go to town with yourself. So the bit of cream that I'm adding, I'll work off later when I walk or kayak or bicycle or swim or run away from whatever's chasing me in the water. Okay, now the main ingredient, lobster. Got some wonderful lobster that we got a whole lobster. It's our tail, our claws, actually 2 sets of claws. We had a couple of lobsters and using them for 2 different things. So I won't cut this up too small. We want to see our wonderful lobster meat. Don't want to feel like we've been cheated. Okay. Just looking. A little bit of pepper. When I tasted it, I didn't get the indication that we needed any salt. Sometimes when you use a fish stock or clam broth, you get quite a bit of flavor of sodium, just by nature of the life they live in the ocean when you're using clams or fish. So now never skimp on the lobster. If you don't have a lot of lobster meat, try and name it something else. Don't call it lobster pot pie. Call it more of a seafood pot pie. And the fact that people are finding some lobster in it is a bonus, rather than have people think you're just on the cheap. Make sure I get all that nice lobster meat. Okay, just put this over here, and we'll move this over here. Now we'll clean up our area a little bit. Okay, that'll be perfect in there. Little piece of puff pastry. Just trim it all the way around. And then we'll get these guys right in the oven too. And we'll make our lobster roll. With a little bit of egg wash. And we'll pop these right in the oven. Okay. I want to take a look at our tart because it looks like it's heating up nicely. Oh, that's beautiful. Look at that. I'm going to put a little bit more egg on that and pop it back in. Great. Okay, now a little treat. Lobster roll. You really don't want to make this too complicated. So, I've got my grill pan heating up. I've got a little bit of butter here. Split top hot dog rolls. They didn't have any, so I made my own. I bought some homemade hot dog rolls, cut the sides off so they're like a split top, because what I want to do with this is I want to put a little bit of butter on the outside, and I want to grill them. This is like just such a wonderful thing. When I was in Kennebunkport, everybody has the best lobster roll, and they're all rated by somebody, and so I used my old Jersey City training to say, the best lobster roll, I'll start out with the cheapest lobster roll. And sure enough, I found lobster rolls of $15, $16, $18. I found a little place that had lobster rolls for $9.95. And it turned out to be a very nice lobster roll. So I really didn't need to spend more than $9.99 for a wonderful lobster roll. So I'm grilling the outside a little bit. That was the other thing they asked, do you want it toasted or untoasted? I said, I'm new at this, help me out. So they said, get it toasted. Again, wonderful fresh lobster meat. Piece of lobster shell, which we don't want. Little bit of mayonnaise, not too much. A little bit of lemon juice. One more seed got away there. And a little bit of chopped scallion. I'm going to mix that up and put it on our wonderful toasted split top homemade hot dog roll. Check our rolls. Beautiful. Oh, good. I'm going to put these back on for one more minute on the opposite side. They'll be buttery. They'll be wonderful. Some people actually pour butter into this, which I don't want to make it too heavy. And I also don't want to dilute the flavors. Tiny bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. And I'm going to give this one a tiny bit of kick with a little cayenne. Remember, it was only a little bit of mayonnaise. Let's see if I can get a little more juice out of this without getting any pits. There's one sneaking out. Some of them are way deep inside. Oh, yeah. All right, so let's take a look at our rolls. Beautiful. Let's check the other side. Oh, perfect. Okay, so we are going to do a quick cleanup. We're going to get our tart out of the oven, get our lobster pot pies out of the oven, plate everything up, and come right back. Well, folks, we're back, and all the work is done. I actually wound up needing a couple extra minutes. You know, when you watch a cooking show, they have what's called the beauty. So they put the uncooked item in the top oven, and later you see them pull another oven out, or they cut to commercial, and they switch them. They have the one that's already done. We don't have that luxury here. We do everything live to tape and take a little break if we need. So I need a little extra cooking time on our lobster pot pie, which was just gorgeous looking. It's actually bubbly, and this wonderful puff pastry on the top, and our wonderful rustic pie. Blueberries, peaches, a little bit of almond on the top. If you have a nut allergy, of course, just leave the nuts out. You could also use different nuts if you like pecans or hazelnuts or walnuts, whatever you like. So again, it's just a rustic look. We brushed it with some egg to give it a nice glaze all the way around. And you can see it's sliced. And of course, our wonderful lobster roll. Fresh lobster meat, tiny bit of mayonnaise, a little bit of lemon. There is no exact science to this, but I would keep it mostly lobster. I put a little bit of scallion, as I said, a tiny bit of mayonnaise, lemon juice. I did toast these rolls, and boy, Ruben and Kevin are going to enjoy eating these two. This is the piece de resistance of the evening. So I just want to show you how wonderful. Be careful about touching. This is very hot. See how our puff pastry, once you cut through it, you're getting into that wonderful creamy mixture with the wonderful lobster meat right inside. Look at this. Oh my goodness. There's a big hunk of lobster meat right there. I'm going to just taste a tiny bit of this. The carrots still have a little bit of crunch to it. I'm closing my eyes. I'm smelling, I'm tasting, I'm seeing the sea. So my little tribute to trip to Maine, wonderful lobster roll. Try the cheapest one first. You can't go wrong. I can usually eat about 3 or 4 of them anyway. Dessert that I don't normally eat, but when you're in Maine, you got to have the blueberries, and of course the wonderful lobster pot pie. I'm David Martone, Executive Chef at Classic Time Cooking School, and thank you for joining me.